I am delighted audience and our guests for this will be. But I am most delighted to welcome the 4 leading Republican candidates to be Michigan's next Chief Executive Officer. Tudor Dixon, Ralph Rebant, Kevin Rinke, and Garrett Soldano. I want to thank each of our 4 candidates for taking the time out of their incredibly busy campaign schedules to be up on the island with us today. But more importantly, I want to thank them for their commitment to Michigan and their commitment to public service and doing the hard work of offering themselves for public service, which we know today is not easy and also not fun. I am also very grateful to 2 very good friends, Rick Albom of Wood TV in Grand Rapids, and Rick Pluta, Michigan Public Radio, for serving as tonight's moderators for the debate. I want to stress, and I'm going to stress this again, that the questions and the format for this evening's debate are exclusively those of our professional journalists who will be moderating the debate. The Chamber has no advanced knowledge of the questions Rick will pose, and nor did we influence the format or the timing of the event. The Chamber's role is simply to offer these candidates our stage for you. When I kicked off this conference Wednesday, I started with the theme that what makes this event unique is that civility still lives here, and it lives in all of us who attend this event on an annual basis. This is one of the things that I am most proud about of the long tradition of the Mackinac Policy Conference. Regardless who is on stage, what their views are, we have always treated each and every one of us with respect and courtesy, and I look forward to that this evening. Tonight will be no exception. Given the political dynamics at play, this November's election is likely to be exceptionally competitive. I am very much looking forward to what our candidates have to say. And as I turn this program over to my friends Rick and our Republican candidates for governor, I look forward to an spirited exchange. I look forward to hearing ideas, and I look forward to you all offering our candidates a warm welcome. With that, I leave you the words of my former boss, President Bush, and my friend, Rick Snyder. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Rick Pluta, Rick Albom.
Please welcome political reporter at Wood TV 8, Rick Albom, and senior Capitol correspondent at Michigan Public Radio Network, Rick Pluta.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Sandy said all that needs to be said about this gathering, except I want to thank the Chamber for having us be a part of this and tell you what the rules are, and they are really, really simple. It starts with each candidate will get each question. They will have 60 seconds to answer that question. Each candidate, if they choose, can then have a 30-second rebuttal after all of the candidates have answered that question. When we get done, and we have people who will time us, well, there'll be a 30-second closing time, but just a quick note about time. There are timing lights down here. When you get to yellow, that means it's time to wrap it up. When it gets to red, it's time to stop, and that's when we will gently remind you that it's time to stop. Those are the simple rules, and that's how we'll play the game tonight.
Please welcome Tudor Dixon, Ralph Rebant, Kevin Rinke, and Garrett Soldano.
Thank you all very much for being here. It'll take me just a second because I have to pull this up and I want this to get off on the right note. So pardon me for just 1 second because my computer had closed down.
Like they say, please stand by.
Here we go. My apologies for the delay. And since it won't open, I'll just do the question from memory. I'll start with you, and here is the question. We don't know precisely what the Supreme Court will do when it comes to Roe v. Wade. The indications are that many people believe that that could be struck down, that 73 ruling could be struck down as early as this month. If that happens, that puts Michigan in a unique situation because a Court of Claims judge has already put a preliminary injunction against the 1931 law that would otherwise govern what happens with abortion here in the state of Michigan. So it is possible that if Roe is somehow made invalid, Michigan will have no law regarding those procedures. If you were governor and that were the circumstance, what would you do?
I am unapologetically pro-life. I believe that we have to protect our babies, and we have to come around the people of the state of Michigan to make sure that we support mothers. We've seen the Democrats, they are working to get the most radical abortion laws on the book that they can possibly get on the books in the state of Michigan. We cannot let that happen. We have to make sure that families are supported in this state. Let me take you back the last 15 years. Abortion had been going down up until 2020. How in a year, when we had everything shut down, did the state of Michigan see an almost 30,000 person abortion rate in this state? This was the highest rate we've seen in 15 years. This is something that we have to come around young people. We are seeing, if you see that uptick in this state, that means this state is not providing what it needs to families to make sure young women and young families feel supported enough that they can afford to have a baby. We need to look at the policies of this state to make sure that this state is family friendly.
Mr. Rabant, what would you do if you were in that situation and there were no controlling law in the state? It's a possibility.
Sure. What I would first of all do is ask, does Elizabeth Gleicher have the right to do what she did? And I would have the Attorney General. Sorry?
The judge.
I'm sorry, the judge. Yes, the judge who ruled that. I would find out if that was even legitimate. But when I talk about being pro-life, I'm not just throwing out a term. I'm talking about the fact that I am convinced that life begins at conception and ends at natural death. And so I'm here to protect our kids and our those who are in the womb. And the reason why I say that is because as we look at what's in front of us, many of us have been praying for 50 years for this time that you just mentioned, Rick, and we want to see that change. And we're not going to give up the fight until we do. And if Governor Whitmer says she's going to fight like hell, we're going to fight harder.
Mr. Ranke?
Yeah, I am pro-life. I have the same position as Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. What we're seeing from the Democrats in proposals across other states, and what I fear for Michigan, is abortions up to 28 days after the birth of the child. 2 states have recently proposed that. Unlimited abortions. And it's wrong, folks. Of the pregnancies that were recorded last year in Michigan, 23% were aborted. It's being used as birth control, and it's wrong. We need to work with the legislature. It's their responsibility to come up with the legislation, and as governor, we'll look at that legislation and make the appropriate decisions.
Mr. Saldana?
Just like everyone else up here, I'm 100% unapologetically pro-life. My mom was adopted. If her birth mother could have had an abortion, I wouldn't be here. And I know a lot of the progressive left wishes that would have happened, but it didn't. A lot of our money shouldn't be going to Planned Parenthood. It should be going to these pregnancy crisis centers. It should be going to these adoption care centers, these foster care centers. And we all know Governor Whitmer is an extremist on abortion. She's an extremist on death. I mean, she's the very one who put COVID-infected elderly in the nursing homes. And so as governor, I will always stand up for the ones who can't stand up for themselves, the unborn. And yes, I will stand up all the way till that conception.
Each of you are entitled to a rebuttal if you choose. Nope.
I would like to ask, through you, the rest of the candidates, if they believe in personhood at conception. That's a critical thing. So I'd just like to ask them if that's okay to ask through you.
It's okay to ask. They certainly don't have to answer, but it's certainly fine for you to ask. Anybody else with a rebuttal?
And we're at in the history of our species, have we ever crucified the child for the act of their mom or dad? That's what you need to think about.
May I ask for a direct answer to that question?
I think you have your answer.
And we'll try to ask the questions as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just trying to find out.
Yeah, I understand. I
want to make
appreciate
sure everybody's pro-life in what they mean.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the next question, we start with Mr. Reband, and that is regarding election integrity. There are still some Republicans who question the validity of the 2020 election. Those complaints generally center around the presidential election, not so much other races down the ballot, many of which were actually won by Republicans. The question is, will you accept the results of the August primary and the election in November as a fair and accurate reflection of the will of the voters?
The answer to that would be yes, if we have proper poll watchers. I know they were thrown out in Detroit because I was one of them who went down and was able to get in because I have a police badge. And so in order for me to accept the election results, I would have to see and know that people are there and not extracted from the room. In 2005, the Federal Election Commission put together a Baker-Carter investigation. And the bottom line was they said that there are two ways to commit fraud. Number one was mass mail-out ballots, which we know Benson did. She sent out 7.7 million pre-filled ballots. We also know that the other thing that they said that would be cause fraud would be not requiring voter ID. And she also instructed the county clerks not to compare the signatures. And so that's why I don't question the election. I question the results of the election from 2020.
Okay, Mr. Rinke.
Yeah, we know that there was fraud in the election, unquestionably. And we know that because there's been fraud in every election. We know that there were significant voter irregularities, record voter irregularities. I'll give you an example. I built a house in a horse pasture. I'm the only one that's ever had a structure on it. I received 6 ballot applications to my home under different people's names. We have 520,000 people that are on voting rolls that have not been active in over 20 years in our state, and we have a governor that vetoes a bill to clean voting rolls. We have a governor that vetoes a bill that says if you vote more than once, you are committing a felony. Government's responsibility is to do one thing well: provide a fair, safe, honest election that the people can believe in. It's the greatest privilege that we have in our republic, and we need to protect it at all costs.
Mr. Saldana.
It's one thing, being around the state many times, is one thing I don't like to hear is, I'm not going to vote because it's not going to count. We have to make sure that our voters understand and know and believe that their vote counts. That's the whole essence of being an American. And if anyone ever messes with our election process, that's called treason, and they should be tried as such. Regarding your question on will I accept the results, well, yeah, because our movement has been going around over the past several months recruiting licensed election inspectors, over thousands of them. Thousands to be involved in this election and make sure that there's no shenanigans. And if you want to see the shenanigans, all you have to do is watch 5,000 Mules.
Ms. Dixon.
2,000 mules. 2,000 mules. But there's probably 5,000 of them. Maybe even 10.
I was going to say maybe 8. Maybe 8.
It's Ms. Dixon's turn.
I love the number of people in this state who have rallied around this cause to make sure that our elections are safe. But we have to wonder, what will the Secretary of State do when it comes to the 22 election? Will she do what she did the last time? Will she try to send absentee ballot applications out to everyone? Will she require voter ID? All of the things that we saw the legislature pass that the governor vetoed were common sense election integrity laws that we see in other states, that most people come out and say, yes, this is exactly what we want. So if we see the Secretary of State running a fair election the way she should be, then that's a different story. But we don't know what she's going to do, because we certainly couldn't have assumed that a woman who ran saying, we don't need voter ID because the signature match is that important, and then went around us and removed the requirements, didn't have the stringent requirements for even a signature match. That's pretty fishy. So we have to see what she's going to do to make sure it's going to be a fair election.
Opportunity for rebuttal, starting with Mr. Reband.
No rebuttal, just the fact that whenever elections are secure, people vote more. That was proven in Mexico. In Europe, there are 46 countries out of 47 that do not allow absentee voting. Actually, I'm sorry, it's 36 out of 47 do not allow absentee voting at all. And so when we think of other nations, we should be setting the standard for them, not them setting the standard for us.
Mr. Rinke?
Yeah. I was called a radical by our existing governor when I said that I expected elections to require that people were alive, breathing, properly registered, and with a voter ID. I think that's common sense. I'm no radical. That's what the people deserve.
Okay. Mr. Saldana?
And that's one thing our movement has been doing over the past several months is help circulating the Secure My Vote petition, which is going to elaborate on voter ID, get rid of ballot harvesting, get rid of the mass mailings of absentee ballot applications, common sense solutions, just like Mrs. Tudor talked about regarding the legislature. They did their job. They passed all these common sense bills, and our governor has vetoed every single one, and that's concerning.
When I get into office, I will make sure we pass those bills right away. We'll make sure that there are no Zuckerbucks coming in and going into fishy places, and we will make sure that voter ID is necessary. We will have secure elections.
Mr. Rinke, we're going to begin with you and this question about the budget in the state of Michigan, which is the biggest it has ever been this year. It will be bigger again next year. So my question is, if you were elected governor, would you continue to let the budget grow year after year, like both Democratic and Republican governors in the past, or would you seek to rein in spending? And if you would try to curb government spending, how would you do it, and what would you cut in the state budget?
Well, in 30 seconds, you can't answer that, or in
You've got
60 seconds. But that being said, Ronald Reagan said the only way to control government spending is to starve it. We have a governor in 4 years that has increased the state budget by 30%. And I'm a candidate that has proposed eliminating the personal income tax, 4.25%, giving back the people $12 billion of their dollars because I believe that you know how to spend it better than government. But I want to point out something. If I give you back $12 billion, you know what we have? The largest budget in the history of our state by $8 billion. It's doable. Government needs to get under control.
Mr. Saldana.
Ronald Reagan also said it's very easy for government to get in our everyday lives. It's very hard to get them out. You know, we need to get our fiscal house in order. I will be cutting the budget every single year. We have to, especially with what's on the horizon with a recession, if not depression. We need to start bringing some foresight and some common sense solutions to the equation with this thing. And with all this overspending that's going on right now, it's just going to continue to dig us into a deeper hole. We have to start having some foresight with this so we can start to bring Michigan back out of the hole that Governor Whitmer has put us in.
Ms. Dixon.
Is this an inflated budget, or is this buying votes? We have the highest budget we've ever seen. The governor is out there touting the fact that she's putting more dollars into education than have ever been put in education in the state of Michigan. And yet, where is our return on investment? That's what we're going to look at when we get into office, is where exactly are we getting the return on the investment of this bloated budget? The Detroit News just put out an article yesterday saying we are headed toward being in the bottom 5 states in the nation on education. And yet the governor is telling us she's putting more money into education than ever before. We are saying we're not measuring success by the money that's going into these programs. We're measuring success by what's coming out. It's time for us to look at what we're getting out of this budget and find out where we can cut and where we can have actual change in the state.
Mr. Rebuttal.
This is more than just an academic question because it deals with our children's future. I would cut the budget in many ways. One is I would eliminate the general budget, because what you end up having is you borrow from Peter to pay Paul when one of those line items isn't working. I would also get rid of corporate welfare. We have spent over $900 billion. The citizens of Michigan have spent over $900 billion to support corporate welfare. It gets us nowhere. I could give the case of the movie theaters in Allen Park where my in-laws live. $147 million wasted. Not one movie was made, and it was at our expense as taxpayers. We got to get rid of the administrative state. I have a plan to get rid of, that sounds terrible. I have a plan to have over 1,000 administrators retired, which will save $70 million in our first year. I also would ask anybody that I would appoint, can you cut your budget by 10%? If they say no, I'm not going to hire them. If they can, I'll bring them on. I've got a lot of other creative ideas. With the prison population, you and I are spending money on people who should be paying their own way.
Go ahead, Mr. Rinke.
Yeah, I think that traditionally governments practice baseline budgeting. Every year they increase their budget by 3%, and there's very rarely accountability. There's over 660 departments in the state. I'm going to go line by line, and instead of spending the people's money, we're going to invest the money wisely and show them results.
Yeah, and you say, where are we going to cut it? Well, number one is look at the universities. A lot of the funding that we're giving them, they should be raising privately. You know, and with all this COVID spending relief money that's coming in, it's almost comical that we're almost trying to bail out the state of Michigan with this governor, what she has done over the past 2 years, with the lockdowns, with the economy, with putting our kids in a mental health crisis, diminishing their experiences, their opportunities and dreams. We should be like Florida and Texas, putting this money where it belongs, into our infrastructure, into making sure that Detroit doesn't flood every thunderstorm, to making sure these lead lines that we're going to start hearing a lot more about are fixed.
Thank you. Ms. Dixon.
I would say right now we have quite a bit of one-time money in there with these COVID funds, and it's crucial that this is not spent by this current administration. We find out who the next administration is because it is too tempting to buy votes right now. We need to make sure that money is on hold until we know where it needs to go.
Thank you all.
Did I get 30 seconds on that too or not?
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, okay, no worries. Yeah, I will tell you that she's already taken the COVID money and put it into the budget. Last year it was $63 billion. This year it's $74 billion, and that COVID money is in there. Once you inflate it, it's hard to come back, as one of the fellows stated. But the thing that I'm finding is I'm digging around in the budget. I'll give you an example. The Michigan State Police used to drive Harley Davidsons. Now they drive BMWs. You ask yourself why. The reason why is because there was a guy who was a Michigan State police officer who retired, and then he went to work for BMW. BMW motorbikes cost more than Harley Davidsons. If you buy them and if you get in an accident with them, they cost a lot more money. So we can tweak a bunch of things like that that just frustrate me.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about bipartisanship in a Republican primary. Please share with Republican voters, and Mr. Saldana, I'm starting with you, how you would work across the aisle with Democrats to get things done, and maybe what are some areas where you see the possibility of bipartisan cooperation?
I tell you what, when I started that movement, which 300,000 people joined in 3 days over 2 years ago, that's all what I always preach in the beginning is unity. And I think as a society right now, we are sick and tired of the fringe left and the fringe right. If you want to take down a country, you don't need it on boots on the ground. You don't need aircraft carriers in the military. How do you destroy a powerful country? You do it from within. You do it with infighting. And I got a story I got to share with all of you real quick. When I was announced last year, obviously I'm pro-life. In our movement, there's a lot of moderates, and she's like, well, I'm pro-choice. Will you have conversation with me? I said, absolutely. She drove 2.5 hours that next week into our meet and greet to meet me. And she came in there and she was fired up. And she met me, she's like, I'm pro-choice, I said, I'm pro-life. For 35 minutes, we had a conversation. Do you think I changed her belief? Nope. Did she change mine? Nope. She gave me a hug. She's like, I've never voted for a Republican before, but I'm voting for you. Never donated to a campaign, but I'm donating to yours. It is time for unity now. United we stand, divided we fall.
Ms. Dixon.
It's time for us to sit down together and talk about what makes a family-friendly Michigan. And I believe that people on both sides of the aisle want to make sure that this state is thriving. And right now, as we've already covered, it's not. On many fronts, we have problems in education. But these are messages that everybody wants. We can all get behind our kids having a world-class education and having no wrong path for our students. Let's sit down and listen to one another. Same with public safety. We know that we need more people in this state. We need to make sure that we can bring 1 million more people into the state of Michigan. But education and public safety are key. We also need to make sure that this state is affordable and it's desirable for our middle class to come here, because our businesses right now could be thriving, but they don't have a workforce. These are all things that we can come together on, sit down and listen, and work out a plan to make sure Michigan is #1 for families.
All right, thank you. Mr. Raban.
My entire experience as a pastor for 35 years has put me in front of people, husbands and wives, families, and even businesses that children inherit who have been at each other's throats, ready to kill each other. I have been successful in counseling those families to come together, to come to some agreements on things, and the families have stuck together. There have hardly been any divorces in our church over 35 years. And as I look at the slate of candidates, as much as I love all these people here, I ask myself, and that's one of the reasons why I'm in the race, who else has the experience to bring people together that are at odds with one another? I've been doing that for 35 years, and it's been amazing to see. And so as I look at my life, I'll go anywhere to talk to anybody who disagrees with me. And that's part of the reason why I'm here today. I know there's a candidate that's not here today, and I won't even go there. But my point is I want to take the message of unity and bringing people together, and that's why I'm here.
Mr. Rinke.
Yeah. I have led my companies and the companies that I've worked for over 35 years by creating an environment for the people that I lead to be successful in. You see, if we take Democrats and Republicans and we give them a survey of what they expect from government, interestingly enough, they agree on about 90%. So, like Newt Gingrich when he came out with the contract with America, we're going to have a contract with Michigan that's common sense, that both sides of the aisle can see that moves the state forward. We're going to disagree and fight like hell on the 10% that we don't agree on. And that's part of the process, and that's part of what makes us great. But bringing people together is what executives do. I've done it for 35 years. I've done it in Lansing. I've done it in private business. I've done it in public businesses. And I've done it with unions and without unions. I'm looking forward to doing it for you.
Mr. Soldano, rebuttal opportunity.
I played football at Western Michigan University. Go Broncos. And in that locker room, there's 120 people from a variety of different experiences and backgrounds, values and beliefs. And we would have conversations, difficult conversations, arguments. But at the end of the day, we had one common goal, and that was to win. And that's what we're going to bring to the table. You're not going to change my belief on the Second Amendment, pro-life, and the Constitution. But if you have a great idea on how to move this state forward economically, how to invest in the long-term energy-dense solutions, my door will always be open for that.
Okay. Ms. Dixon?
It is important to take a look at people's records on how they did run their businesses in the past. And I would say that I come from an industry that is not historically female-friendly. And I learned to humble myself, come to the table, and listen. We are a society of talkers. It's time to sit down and listen to one another and move forward with the ideas that we can create together.
Mr. Raban?
Our state is full of hate and division, and my faith tells me that I can't just not to hate somebody. That doesn't tell me to tolerate people, but it tells me to love someone as I love myself. And so as I look at citizens, as I look at people across the aisle, I don't look at them as enemies. I don't look at them as people who are warped in their brains. I look at people who we can sit down and talk about how to do this, and modeling it, as I said, for 35 years is an amazing track record.
Okay, and before we move on to our next question, rebuttal opportunity.
No rebuttal. I've said what I said.
We'll move on now, and starting with you, Ms. Dixon. And this is a tough question because it impacts us all. In the past week, we've seen another heartbreaking, senseless example of innocent students being killed in classrooms when a person with a gun inexplicably comes in and starts firing, devastating families and a community in West Texas. Sadly, we're just 6 months out of a similar event right here in Michigan. Dealing specifically with the issue of school safety and guns, what can be done? What should be done to secure our schools? And does that involve some type of regulation on guns, possession, or storage? What measures might you as governor work on with the legislature to ensure schools are safe places for children to learn?
Obviously an issue near and dear to my heart because I drop 4 little girls off at school every single day, and a day does not go by that I don't think of those families and what they go through after they lose their child. It's unimaginable. So that is top of mind for me. Getting into this position, what can we do? We have a report from 2018 from our state police about how to make our schools safe, a safe schools report. We have to look through that, sit down with the legislature and say, look, these are the recommendations from people who have been trained to protect us. They are looking at ways to protect our students. How can we do this to make sure that this doesn't happen in Michigan? Our schools right now are a soft target. We have to make sure we harden our schools. This is the one area where I say these COVID funds that came in, this is a good time to spend the summer, take some of those funds and harden our schools over the summer so that when our kids come back, they're safe.
Mr. Rudan?
This is tough because I went to the Oxford Vigils and the Oxford Visitations, and I did not go as a governor candidate. No one even knew I was a governor candidate. I went as a police chaplain, as a pastor, because I knew there were people who would need help and counseling. So I gathered around students who were crying and having a difficult time. So as I thought about that, my friends, the issue isn't guns. Guns haven't changed. The issue is we have taken God out of the culture, we've taken God out of the classroom, and we've taken God out of the courtroom. Our kids have no idea of values. They have no idea of respect for life, and it's because we've removed God. And so as I look at my opportunities as a governor, there are a couple things really quick. I would do a single entry entrance into every school. I would get gun-sniffing dogs, and I would hire retired law enforcement or veterans to help protect those, because schools as a gun-free zone are killing zones.
Mr. Rinke?
Yeah, this has happened before, and I question. We have smart people that have done nothing. We discuss the same thing happening time after time. There was a report written by the state police. Our government and our teachers' union did not implement the recommendations of that support. Government and schools need to act, and they need to act quickly to protect our kids. I proposed having former military that could volunteer and work in our school system with a state police program that would train them as hall monitors. I went to public schools. We had hall monitors that were armed, and we learned how to deal with the police and accept them versus fear them. We have the support of the Second Amendment is not something that I'm ever going to question. I believe in constitutional carry for our Second Amendment, just like I believe in free speech. And yet we can have safe schools as well as gun rights for law-abiding citizens.
Mr. Saldana?
Look, if you looked at evil that happened in New York the week prior, and you look at what I call Chicago now, because they have the most mass shootings in any city in the U.S., we don't have a gun problem. We have a mental health crisis. And that's one thing that I look at right now is opportunity. And look at the opportunity, what we could have had if we had all this COVID money, not trying to bail out the mental health crisis this governor put our kids in, but have that money to actually secure our kids. Because every single student, teacher, administration that works at that school, they should always know and feel safe. 1-point entry, having teachers be armed if they choose to, and having the yearly training necessary so they're confident to do so. When evil comes knocking at that door, they should understand and know that there's going to be a fist fight in a phone booth on the other side of that door. And as Michigan's next governor, I will make sure that every single one of your kids, your grandchildren, your teachers, and your administration feels safe, and so we can further our society. But there has to be an emphasis on mental health now and an emphasis on social media. They should not get a get-out-of-jail-free card with this.
Before we move on, does anybody have anything to add, beginning with you, Ms. Dixon?
Yeah, we look at our schools right now. You asked about a bipartisan issue. What could be a better bipartisan issue? Like I said, family first will always be my message. It's time for us to sit down and say, what can we do to make sure our kids are safe? They are our future. They're the most important part of our future, and we have to secure their schools.
Mr. Rudan?
Yes, I'm the only law enforcement candidate left in the race. In fact, the Michigan Chiefs of Police in southeastern Michigan have unanimously endorsed me as their candidate for governor. And so I look forward to working with them to have real solutions that work. They said to me they don't remember ever having a friendly governor in Lansing. And so they've endorsed me, and I can tell you that as one who's concerned about safety of our kids in schools, I will stand up and implement those things that they suggest as well.
Mr. Rinke?
Yeah, as your governor, I will act versus talk about making the changes necessary. I've looked at other countries like Israel that have implemented common sense approaches. We don't want our kids to feel like they're going to prison. We don't want our kids to go to school to be fearful. We need them to be there focusing on learning, reading, writing, arithmetic, and civics. We'll have people protect them. It doesn't need to be teachers with guns. We'll have folks that are familiar with guns and comfortable with them.
Mr. Saldana?
And look, I agree with Kevin when he said about constitutional carry in the state of Michigan. Think about this. Guns protect the president. Guns protect the congressmen and women. Guns protect our governor, our banks, and our courts. But we have gun-free school zones, and when evil knocks on the door, we call the people with the guns. That doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me at all. And so those are the things that we have to change. Again, an emphasis on mental health.
Thank you all. And Rick, I would point out we're already halfway through our hour. So we appreciate you with all of your answers, but we're covering a lot of ground quickly.
Well, let's focus a little bit on mental health, and we'll be starting with Mr. Reband. Give us an idea of your plans for Michigan's mental health system and how to improve services, especially for children and in workplaces. I'll point out that there is a recent report from the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity that recommended improvements to help employers with stress and other workplace mental health issues. So workplaces and schools, please.
Well, for sure, mental health is a problem across the board. In fact, the federal government did a study, and they said that by offering children vouchers so they could go to different schools, we're talking about school shootings, the mental health would be improved if they had vouchers to go somewhere else. And so that's the first thing that I would do to help children out of the issues that they're facing right now. I'd help them with getting into a school where they do feel safe. And obviously, there are those that are safe around the state. I also see this as a huge problem when it comes to law enforcement. That happens to be the niche that I think oftentimes from. And when you have a criminal in prison, they're $40,000 a year, but mental health prisoners are $100,000 a year to take care of. And the issue is you can't just put somebody into a prison cell and call them mentally ill or whatever without any change, without any help on it. So my idea would be to bring people into the prisons who can help get these folks stabilized once again. I'm against medication. We medicate people too much.
To wrap it up.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Mr. Rinke.
Yep. We've eliminated mental health care in the state of Michigan many years ago. And we've relied on police. We've relied on teachers who are supposed to be educators to become mental health professionals. We overwhelm our counselors in schools on the ratios that the state mandates on children to counselors. So even our kids who have issues oftentimes can't get access to those counselors. We need to teach our kids how to cope. And there are very specific techniques that can be utilized. And if we support our counselors within our public school systems, that's the first step, and it's the quickest step to helping our kids.
Okay, Mr. Saldana.
It's such an in-depth, complicated issue, and one thing is for sure is the check engine light is on. And why is that check engine light on? That's what we have to ask ourselves is why do we have a mental health crisis? A large one now, not only in our adults but our children. And it goes right back to the pandemic and these unconstitutional lockdowns that our governor did, and to implore one another to wear the mask, and if not, do it forcefully. And then she hammered out at our kids even more and canceled their experiences, their opportunities, diminished their dreams, put them online. Where now what? We heard that 30% of these kids, when they were reporting for online, they weren't there. So again, this is such a complex issue, and throwing money at this is not just going to be the cure-all. We have to remove the why. The why and who put us into this situation is Governor Whitmer. And she can run away from that, but she's the reason why it happened. But we need to put an emphasis on parenting. We need to put an emphasis on when you hear something on social media that's a little out of touch, then you report it to the authorities. This is going to be an all-of-the-above approach with mental health, and it's a culture issue, and we all have to get involved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Saldana. Ms. Dixon.
Well, we had this problem before the pandemic, but then we went through a crisis. And we saw that a lot more people were struggling with mental health issues. In fact, I've heard people say, just today, I was talking to someone earlier who said, after the pandemic, we had people that just said, I'm going to retire, I'm too afraid to go back to work. We have more of a mental health crisis than we could have ever imagined at a time when we've reduced beds in this state. I've talked to police chiefs up in the UP who say, we sometimes wait a month after we have someone come in and we have to hold them in jail before we can get them to a mental health hospital, before we can get someone to transport them, and before we have a bed. This governor took funding away. We were thinking Caro would have 200 beds instead of 150. Now it has 100 beds. We have some legislators who are working very hard every single day to increase our beds in this state. We had a pediatric crisis as well. We had too many kids that were being turned away from mental hospitals during the pandemic. It has to be a top focus for the state.
All right, thank you. Rebuttal opportunities, starting with Mr. Raban.
Thank you. The mental health issue is tied to so many things. It's tied to suicide. It's tied to depression. And one of the things that's being hidden and buried right now is a mental health issue connected with marijuana. And the problem is that the marijuana that I can't say I grew up with, because truly, not like Clinton, I never smoked a marijuana joint. But the reality is, back in our day, marijuana THC content was around 10 to 15%. Now with scientifically engineered marijuana, the THC...
You're going to have to wrap it up. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm a pastor. I don't watch the clock. Sorry about that.
We love you.
Mr. Rinke.
Yeah. Our socialization skills have gone down. Drug use has gone up. People cutting themselves has gone up. Depression has gone up. We are creatures that need socialization. We need to look people in the face, not look at a mask. We need to touch. We need to feel. We need to understand and be concerned about our children. And we lost that during this pandemic by separating our kids. Computers and cell phones don't provide the answer.
Mr. Rinke, you need to wrap up.
Thank you, I just did.
Okay. So, and Mr. Saldana, do you have a rebuttal?
It's the ongoing mental health crisis, especially with these workers who've been fired because of medical freedom. Let's talk about that. The 500 workers at Michigan State that lost their jobs because they didn't go through with the vaccine. That's unacceptable. And as your next governor, I will always stand for medical freedom. I will back your medical waiver. I will back your religious waiver. And as Michigan's next governor, I'm going to tack on a philosophical waiver because as an American, you have a choice. You don't get to know my religion. You don't get to know my health. You have a choice as an American. You will have a leader that will have your back, and we will end this nonsense.
Ms. Dixon, rebuttal opportunity?
Yes, we need to hold the governor accountable for the political science decisions that she made that impacted mental health with the people that we saw dying in nursing homes, with the young students who lost their opportunity at sports, were kept out of school, the unemployment situation. Some people were on, some people were off. We need to hold them accountable to those decisions.
All right, thanks. Rick?
You may recall, and I'm starting with Mr. Rinke, that 4 years ago, Governor Whitmer, then candidate Whitmer, ran on a pledge. You may not remember it, but she said once or twice she was going to fix the damn roads. And while no one could expect all the roads in Michigan to be fixed in 4 years, and in fairness, you all have been driving around the state and there is road construction going on, funding has taken place through bonding and some federal dollars that have been coming in. But the governor readily admits that the pace cannot be maintained unless there is more funding that is generated from the state. So here's my question. If you were elected governor, what would you do, including how would you pay for, improving Michigan's crumbling roads and infrastructure? Mr. Rinke.
So what we have is a situation that the cost of our roads, while we pontificated on fixing them, went up 40% in 4 years. All of the budgets that were projected are wrong. 42% of our roads in the state, are in poor condition and will get worse. We have regulations that restrict how long people can work on the roads. We have regulations in different counties that shut down asphalt plants, cement plants. We have driver restrictions. Michigan's roads are designed to fail at a higher rate than other roads in the Midwest. And we see that because we allow heavier trucks on our roads than any other state. And yes, there's displacement. Yes, we are a commerce source, and we need to continue that. We need to build roads that work for that.
Mr. Saldana.
Over the past year, I've traveled, I think, over 35,000 miles on the trail. And my goodness gracious, have we had to dodge potholes. Thank God I'm a chiropractor. Look, these roads are a mess. We all know it. Kevin's right. The price of materials and everything have gone up dramatically. The budgets are all screwed up. So how are we going to increase tax revenue? That was your question. Well, if we don't get businesses back here, we're dead in the water. So how are we going to get these jobs back? Well, number one, we have to make sure that Michigan is a business-friendly state, that making sure that no governor can weaponize the health department again to shut us down in the next cold and flu season. We have to cut regulations. We have to cut corporate taxes. We have to make sure that we're investing in long-term energy-dense solutions so we're competing with states like Texas, who took 11,000 jobs because our energy's too expensive here in the state of Michigan. That's what we need. If we don't increase our tax revenue by attracting jobs, and jobs are going to attract families, then Michigan's going to be dead in the water, and we need a leader. We need a governor to be able to do just that, and I'm the man for the job.
Ms. Dixon.
I love that you say that this is what the governor ran on, but I'm not sure if you heard the breaking news. Yesterday, she came out and said that she didn't promise she was going to fix the roads. So I don't know if she's trying to backpedal. She says she needs a second term to make sure she's going to do that. Do we trust this governor with a second term when she says that wasn't her promise? I don't think another 4 years is going to get her there. How would we fix the roads? We need to make sure we are using local resources. It's costing us millions of dollars every year to bring in resources from out of state because we aren't able to get them locally, even though they are available. We also need to fix the funding. There is a possibility to have a better formula. It was presented to this governor, and she had a better idea to give us a 45-cent gas tax. Obviously, that's not popular, and it certainly wouldn't be popular at this point in time when people can't afford to fill up their tanks as it is.
Mr. Raban.
When I came here today, I thought there was going to be 5 podiums, and one of them would be Governor Whitmer, because she's acting more like a Republican now, cutting taxes and now trying to fulfill her promises on the roads. But the reality is, she's now acting like a governor 2 months before the election. And we needed a person that's going to be a governor the entire 4 years that they're in office. My wife and I took a 40th anniversary to Italy, and you know what we did? We walked on Roman roads that have been around for 2,000 years. And if they had that kind of technology back then, what the heck are we missing here today? Am I done?
I believe you are. And I
just
apologize
getting
for
started.
the red light did not come on, but I feel relatively certain.
I'll come
you are.
back.
Let's talk about rebuttal. Mr. Enrique, you have more to say?
Yeah, you know, we need government elected officials to be honest with people. In the governor's State of the State, she said that she had fixed roughly 13,980 lane miles of roads. And I'd never heard the term in my 60 years, so I called a friend who worked for MDOT. A 4-lane highway with a shoulder on each side counts as 6 miles for every mile of repair. We need people that are candid and treat us with respect, with honesty, and explain the situation and what it costs.
Mr. Saldana.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what my man Ralph said about the Roman roads, he's right. Long-term solutions. You know, there's a couple long-term solutions that might be on the table, making them thicker so they don't degrade every several years. Another option would be they're doing studies on mixing asphalt and rubber together so they can contract in the frost and freeze, and so that study's being done. But we need to start bringing some foresight for some long-term solutions so we can get them fixed and they can stay fixed.
Ms. Dixon.
Let's look at transparency in road building contracts, and also let's take a look at the formula. Like I said, right now we are funding road mile rather than lane mile. People that run on a 2-lane road have much better roads than a 6-lane road.
Mr. Rabat.
There's a lot that goes into getting the right roads and the right combination. I've been in the construction industry. My father-in-law is a builder, and I've poured concrete myself, and I know all about it. And so there's a lot that goes into it: design, preparation, what's underneath the cement, and even how much concrete and cement is inside of that. And so I would make sure, as was mentioned, that we have the proper mixture to make the roads last.
Okay, so this is a politics question. Have you asked President Trump for his endorsement? And if you have not heard back, why do you think that is? And starting with Mr. Saldana.
I haven't not personally asked for his endorsement. I would gladly accept it. He is still my president. That's one thing that COVID did for a lot of us, and what President Trump has done for a lot of us. He's awakened a lot of people to get involved in politics. If you would have came to me 2 years ago and said that I was going to be running for governor, I would have laughed you out of the room. Never in a million years would have thought I'd be on stage in front of you. But President Trump and COVID taught us some valuable things. It's time for ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And that's one thing that I've learned is don't you ever think that you can't make a difference, because you can. You never know what small act that you may say or do that may change the lives of millions tomorrow. Why I'm up here right now started with a 5-minute hissy fit video on Facebook. So you never know. The power of one may lead to the power of many.
Okay, Ms. Saldana.
Wait, what?
What?
Don't
Whoa.
call me
What?
that.
My wife's over there.
One of those moments. Mr. Saldana.
That would be a new development.
My apologies. Just me.
I love you, honey.
Ms. Dixon.
I have sat down with President Trump several times, and we have talked about his focus on Michigan. As you know, he is very focused on Michigan. He's already come into the state in multiple races and had a bit of involvement, and he's watching it closely. I know that for a fact. And I think that he's watching it closely because Michigan seems to be changing on a daily basis. I don't know if you've noticed that, but things, people are in the race, people are out of the race. So, we all feel blessed that he's been waiting and watching. And I think that he will likely get into this race, but we'll see what he does. And I would gladly welcome his endorsement.
All right, Mr. Raban.
I also would gladly welcome his endorsement. He's my favorite president because not only did he have awesome policies, but he had amazing tweets. Seriously, though, on the other hand, his policies were so profound, and I have pursued that. I've pursued that through friends that I know that know him. I serve on the Council for National Policy in Washington, D.C., and there are a lot of people on that council that have direct relationships with him. And so I have sought that, and our campaign is working on it even as we speak. And so I would certainly be pleased to have that endorsement. I do have Mike Lindell's endorsement since I don't have a red lead thing. But anyway, Mike Lindell's endorsed me because of my stand against the election fraud.
Mr. Rinke.
Yeah, Michigan's a purple state, and this is going to be a tough election, and it's going to be decided by people who have traditionally struggled with President Trump. I voted for him twice. I support the man. I think he did great things for our country. I'm taking an approach like Glenn Youngkin did, to win Michigan for the Republican Party, and President Trump showed tremendous restraint and appropriately endorsed Governor-elect Youngkin at the right time. Of course I would welcome his endorsement. I look forward to it, and we're going to win back Michigan for Republicans and for President Trump.
Mr. Saldano, a brief rebuttal if you'd like.
I'm good.
Ms. Dixon, redemption, brief rebuttal if you'd like.
I'm good.
Same?
Well, candidates, we've come to that part of the day where you're going to get 30 final seconds to tell this crowd and the assembled folks that are streaming this around the state why they could vote for you in the August primary. 30 seconds, we're going to hold it tight. I think the lights are working. If not, we'll be here all night. So the next question would have gone first to you, Ms. Dixon, so you have 30 seconds.
Like I said, I want to bring back a family-friendly Michigan. I want this to be the state that people flock to. Right now, we see 1,000 people a day going to Florida, something like that. Forget about Florida. We have beaches, we have a beautiful landscape, and we're going to be the state that leads the nation once again. As long as we bring back these family-friendly values where we have great education, we have a phenomenal workforce, and we have safe cities. That is what I want to see in the state of Michigan, and I hope you will all join me. Thank you so much for listening to me tonight. God bless you, and God bless Michigan.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Mr. Raban.
I'm convinced that if we don't get God right in this next election, nothing's going to matter. When you look at the last 60 years, that's what the difference is. We're trying to solve our problems without having God in culture. And so President John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made for a religious and moral people. It is totally unsuitable for any other." And my friends, that's why I'm running for governor, because I realize that if we're going to get this thing right, you have to have a governor who understands, as our founders did, the perspective of bringing God back into culture.
Mr. Rinke.
I'm a businessman, not a politician, and I want you to vote for me to be the Chief Executive Officer of the state of Michigan so I can get the same results for you that I've gotten for hundreds of thousands of employees in the state of Michigan, for the millions of people that my family has served over the years in the state of Michigan. I'm looking forward to delivering big things and creating that environment for everyone in Michigan to be successful in.
Mr. Saldana.
In the beginning, when she started to unilaterally control over all of us, I was waiting for somebody in a position of authority, an elected official, somebody in a position of power to represent all of us, and all I heard was crickets. And again, it's time for ordinary people to do extraordinary things. So I started a movement of hundreds of thousands of people, and we inspired positive change. And the change that we went after is that 1945 law, which that governor was unilaterally controlling over all of us. We took that away from her. And looking on stage, I'm the only candidate up here who's 1-0 against Governor Whitmer. And so, folks, we're going to get this done. And we are going to blaze a trail so wide, so big, so full of hope and inspiration.
We're done.
We're done.
We'll get it done. I'm Garrett Soldano, and your next governor. There we go.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you, Rick Albin. Great to be
pleasure.
your partner here. Thanks to the Detroit Regional Chamber for offering this public service. Thank you to Detroit Public Television for streaming this public service. And thank you, all of you, for joining us and paying attention to what will be a very consequential election year.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Nice job.